Hello, grade 7. Today we will talk about Mendel experiments on pea plant. Okay? Mendel experimented with thousands of pea plants. Today, Mendel discovers from the foundation of genetics. The scientific study of heredity shows the parts of pea plant's flower. The pistil produce female sex cell or eggs. The stamens produce pollen grains which contain the male sex cell or sperm. And new organisms begin to form when egg and sperm cell join in the process called fertilization, okay? And before fertilization can happen in pea plant, pollen must reach to the pistil of the pea flower. This process is called pollination, okay? Pea plants are usually self-pollinating. Okay, in self-pollination, pollen from a flower lands on the pistil of the same flower. Mendel developed a method by which he cross-pollinated or crossed pea plants. Okay, shows his method. Mendel decided to cross plants that had contrasting forms of trait. Okay, for example, tall pea plants and short or dwarf pea plants. He started with the purebred plants. Okay, what's meant by a purebred organism? Is an offspring of many generations that have the same form of the traits. Okay, example of purebred tall pea plants always come from the tall parent plants. What happened after Mendel crossed tall pea plant with a dwarf pea plant? What happened? What appears in offspring? Mendel crossed the purebred tall plant with a purebred short plant, okay, and today scientists call these plants the parent or pea generation, okay. The resulting offspring are the first filial, that's symbolized by F1 generation, and the word filial comes from filia or filius, from the Latin words for daughter and son, okay. Mendel found in F1 generation all the offspring appear in front of you, okay? All of them were tall. And the shortness or dwarfness trait seemed to have disappeared in F1 generation, okay? After that, when these plants were full grown, Mendel allowed them to self-pollinate, okay? And after that, the second filial or F2 generation that followed surprised Mendel even more. He counted the plant of second filial generation or F2 generation. He observed that about 3/4 were tall while 1/4 were short, or by another term, about 75% of second filial were tall, while 25% were short, okay? Mendel repeated his experiments even more and studying other pea plant traits, okay, such as color and seed shape. In all of his crosses, Mendel found that only one form of the trait appeared in first generation, okay? However, in second generation, the lost form of the trait always reappeared in about 1/4 or 1/4, that's equal to 25% of the plant, okay? So, we can summarize the observation of Mendel in these points. Mendel found in the first generation, after cross-pollination made between tall and short pea plant, all offspring were tall, all offspring appeared in first generation were tall, okay? And shortness trait seemed to have disappeared in first generation, okay? But when these plants were full grown and the Mendel allowed them to self-pollinate, what happened? Okay, what did Mendel observe? The second generation surprised Mendel. He found 3/4 were tall, and while 1/4 only were short. Okay. So, in all his crosses, after Mendel repeated his experiment and studying other pea plant traits as flower color and seed shape, he found that in all his crosses, Mendel found that only one form of trait appeared in first generation. Okay. However, in the second generation, the lost form of trait, okay, always reappeared in about 1/4 of the plant. Okay. Mendel reached several conclusions from his experiments results. Okay. Mendel, number one, the first conclusion, he reasoned that sets of genetic factors must control the inheritance of traits in bees. Okay. So Mendel, okay, realized that there are genetic factors that control the inheritance of the traits in peas plants. Okay. Number two, conclusion number two, the factors that control each trait exist in bears, where the offspring receive one factor from female parent, okay, while receive the other factor from male parent. So each trait controlled by factors, okay, and these factors exist in bears, okay, one from female parent and the other from male parent. Finally, one factor in a bear from the genetic factors that control the trait can mask or hide the other factor because this factor is strong, okay, while the hidden factor is weak, okay. Examples, tallness factor masked the shortness factor because tallness factor is a strong factor of the trait, while shortness factor is a weak factor of the trait, okay. Now, scientists use word gene to describe the factors that control a trait. What the difference between gene and alleles? What the difference between gene word and alleles word? Gene is the portion of DNA that determines a certain trait. If it is found, it determines the certain trait responsible for appearance of the trait on the living organisms, okay, responsible for expression of the traits, okay. Gene don't occur in bears, don't found in bears, okay, as we see the gene of the tallness symbolized by T capital, the gene of the shortness symbolized by T small, okay, the gene of the flower color of the bee symbolized by W capital, the gene of the Berber color of the flower represented by W small, okay. So the gene don't occur in bears, while alleles is a specific form of gene, okay, that's responsible for variations in which a given trait can be expressed, okay. Alleles occurs in bears, okay, must occur in bears, like alleles of white flowers represented by W capital, okay, and alleles of Berber flowers, alleles of white flowers represented by W small, while alleles of Berber flower, W capital, okay. So, an organism's traits are controlled by alleles it inherits from its parent, okay. Some alleles are dominant, while other alleles are recessive, okay. We have two types of allele or traits. We have a dominant trait or dominant allele and also a recessive allele or a recessive trait. What's the difference between them? Dominant allele is the one whose trait always show up in the organism when the allele is present, okay? And this is known as a strong allele, okay? While recessive allele, on the other hand, is hidden whenever the dominant allele is present, okay? And this is known as weak allele, okay? Mendel studied seven traits inheritance of pea plants studied by Mendel, okay, 7 traits of pea plant, like seed shape, seed color, bud shape, bud color, flower position, stem height, okay. Seed shape, wrinkled, recessive, round, dominant. Seed color, yellow and green. Yellow, dominant, green, recessive. Bud shape, pinched or smooth, okay. Pinched, recessive, smooth, dominant. Bud color, green or yellow. Green, dominant, while yellow is recessive. Flower color, purple or white. Purple is dominant trait, while white flower color is recessive trait. Flower position, tip of stem, side of stem. Tip of stem is recessive, while side of the stem dominant. The stem height, tall or shortness, tallness or shortness. Tallness is dominant trait, while shortness is recessive traits. Okay. Thank you. Grade 7. And goodbye.